in contrary to what orthodox or neoclassical economists, neoliberal economists argue, maybe less neoliberal economists, is that it doesn't spontaneously emerge from trade, but rather it's always being organized, it's always being produced from some kind of governance authority.
Absolutely. You have the regulating rules, which are rules put on the market, like a price ceiling and things like that. That's regulating rules. But then you have the constitutive rules of the market, which is sort of the rules telling you what can be owned. Can you own genes? What is money? And who can own things? Those are the constitutive rules. And without the constitutive rules, you don't have a market.
To say MMT is wrong is to not understand what MMT is. Modern monetary theory in a nutshell. Lots of good sources, okay? A rampaging, mutant macroeconomic theory called modern monetary theory is kicking kikesters and smacking down conventional wisdom in economic circles these days. Fucking rights it is. This is because an energized group of MMT economists, bloggers, and their loyal foot soldiers led by Mosler, Bill Mitchell, Randall Wray are swarming on the internet. Chill on the hyperbole, dude. Just kidding. But this is from 2011, right? And so that's interesting, to show how ahead of its time it was, because in a popular, more popular sense with respect to this, it's still just coming to the fore. And we have to take that into consideration again. Why the slow timescales? Why does this true stuff take so long to break through? That's the meta question, isn't it? Because it threatens the established order. The implications of really good meta theories is that it changes a lot very quickly, potentially, okay? So of course, conservative traditionalist thinkers are going to be opposed to this. They're threatened by it. They don't understand it. They've invested so much time and energy into understanding things in a crude, classical way. It's just fucking wrong. We need to look at the world in 2022 and see what a goddamn systemic conspiracy it is, with all the chaos and inequality and climate crisis and war unfolding, and recognize this is baked in to the status quo. And so we need good, true, heterodox explanations and normative and prescriptive projects and programs like this that want to shift the entire paradigm.
When we look at MMT, as you were saying, you made a comparison to CRT. I've been half joking but serious. MMT is a CRT of economics, right? It's a critique. It's a critique of the neoclassical economic paradigm that's founded on, obviously scarcity economics and austerity policies, but also founded on a lot of assumptions, as if the economy works like a machine, like some kind of simple system where, like, if we print money, ergo we're going to have hyperinflation, and there's not a lot of substantive, there's no seeing through those neoliberal abstractions into the actual dynamics of material reality and complex systems.
Well, let's just get $10 trillion coins, right. Give one to China, one to Europe. Are we square? Good. And then we start again, because this whole thing seems manufactured. Swap it for them for the debt, and then at the very least, we now control, we've bought back our mortgage. So now we can never foreclose on it. Even if interest rates go up, we have a lot more control over our debt.
The question is not how. The question is, why is it obstructed? And what they're getting at with solving the debt issue by just printing more money, we can do that to pre-distribute and redistribute direct cash to poor people, as well as public sector investment that gives people jobs and income. This is the right thing to do economically, is to solve war and solve political polarization and solve extreme inequality by using the conceptual instrument of money And this is what MMT does by getting inside the concept. What I'm more endeared to is these folks, money on the left, because they take an approach through the lenses of media analysis and film and aesthetics and history and theology and, you know, a lot of things outside or adjacent to economics, or so you would think conventionally. A lot of good stuff. Don't look up. You see, this is what people are missing, like big time. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome, Andrés.
Hello, Andrés. I'm Tomas.
Hey, Thomas. Great to connect. Great to meet you.
Great to see you. And thank you, Brent, for bringing us together, all of three of us here.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad we could finally all come through and make this happen. And I know everybody's short on time, so I won't do any formal introduction. I can add that later if I publish this.
Yeah.
But
so I think we only have 15 minutes.
Okay.
It's starting to get late in Stockholm,
Okay.
and I have a dinner appointment. But I'm happy to reconnect at another point. So
Okay.
it's good to just have a first.
Yeah. So here's my
Introduction.
quick pitch and introduction. As I was just telling Thomas, like, I'm pulled in very different directions between Thomas's metamodernism and the sort of communities that I participate in and contribute to, and Andrés's MMT project and the content they produce. And given that that Tomas here has a economics and banking background, and that Andrés has some expertise on these things, and that there's already a good faith mutual interest, I think cross-pollination is a long time coming. However, as I just said to Tomas, like, there's this hanging question of like things like social justice and practical paradigmatic policies like the Green New Deal. I'm 100% in alignment with Andrés and the MMT sort of crew and sort of community of people emerging. But there seems to be a huge chasm and gap in those discourses, right? And so Andrés, as well as myself, we share critiques of the metamodern spaces as they exist, right? So I'm seeing an opportunity here, and not just an opportunity. I almost feel like we need each other. You know, we need that cross validation, that solidarity. So the purpose of this is to just kind of introduce each other. You know, Andrés is a teacher as well as an activist and all these things. And Tomas is an entrepreneur in addition to an author and all these things. So, you know, and you both know me to some extent in different capacities, and I appreciate that. So really, I'll stop talking now. I just wanted to bring you guys together, smash you together really, and sort of hit the ground running. What do you know about each other already? Maybe let's start there. And
Yeah, I know a little bit. I watched some videos where Andrés has participated, and of course I know about MMT, but I know very little about you, Andrés. So if you take just two minutes to give me your personal background, and then I will do the same.
Cool, great. Yeah, personal background. I was born in Bogota in Colombia, immigrated here to the US when I was 4, and lived in different parts of the country, in the Midwest in Chicago first, and then on the border with Texas, with Mexico in South Texas. Spent some time in California as well, and now I'm in New York. Academically, you know, I got an undergrad in philosophy, and that kind of started me down this path. Mostly interested or trained, I guess, in continental philosophy and social theory, critical theory, that sort of thing, existentialism, and political philosophy. But then I spent my first experience in graduate school in a program on organizational leadership, organizational leadership, management, organizational development, group relations, that sort of world. That's kind of what first introduced me to spaces like metamodernism and integral theory and that sort of thing. I'm not too well versed in it, but I am kind of, I know about it, and there are aspects of it that do very much grab my interest. And then I moved to New York and started a doctorate in public policy. At first, mostly I was interested in kind of the worker cooperative or worker ownership movement. But I felt there was a lot of unanswered questions about the macro economy in those movements and in those spaces. So I started to look for heterodox or alternative views on finance and the economy and the macro economy in particular. First kind of started through the lens of economic sociology. And then that was around the time that I began to discover MMT. And because I had been reading like Polanyi and that sort of economic sociology tradition, it kind of was a little organic for me to get into MMT. And that kind of coincided with the time that I was working for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And so yeah, that's kind of the story in a nutshell. Got into the Green New Deal right away after that campaign. And it was interestingly enough that at first MMT, when I got into MMT, it was mostly just the economics, the very formal 101 stuff. But over time, I've connected with colleagues who are in the MMT community, but are themselves philosophers and social theorists. And so that has kind of taken me in a bit of a different direction than other MMTers, but I kind of live in different spaces. So that's kind of my story there.
Okay, thank you. And nowadays, what do you spend most of your time on?
Still researching the Green New Deal, finishing that project. I just wrote a paper on the price issues that we're facing right now. So kind of gave like an MMT lens on inflation recently. So that's what I'm doing there. In my spare time, I'm kind of going back in history, and interestingly enough, because I've never kind of spent time in this before, looking at late medieval theological debates, because my colleagues convinced me that modernity is what it is because of the results of these debates in the late Middle Ages.
So when you're talking about late Middle Ages, are you back at Thomas Aquinas?
Yeah.
Or yeah?
Yeah.
Or is it more at the level of Descartes?
No, mostly Aquinas and the debates he was having with the Franciscans and with Duns Scotus, and then moving into the Renaissance, and how those debates led to what modernism and what we could call, I guess, secular society had its roots in those.
Okay, wonderful. I'm a big fan of history, and especially big history, but these sort of watershed movements and how paradigm shifts happen. So I would be very interested in reading about that. I know, of course, Thomas Aquinas from a theological and philosophical perspective, but I was not aware of the importance of these discussions for the paradigm shift into modernity. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, very cool. And it was very new to me. But you know, my colleagues are kind of taking, you know, this progressive, you know, radical reading of Aquinas and the importance of the analogy of being as a metaphysics, and using that to kind of frame what MMT's theory of money it gives us. So that's kind of an ongoing project for me as well.
Okay, great. Okay, so my story equally short. I'm Swedish. I studied mathematics and physics at university and thought that I would become an professional academics within those fields, but for various reasons I left academia and became an entrepreneur, started a number of projects, some small and unsuccessful, but at least 3 major areas that I've been involved with are IT, property, and banking. I started my own banking organization from scratch in Stockholm in the beginning of the 90s. And during the 90s, it was easy to make your clients happy in banking because all the markets were just going up. So already in 96, we had offices in Stockholm, Gothenburg, Malmö, Oslo, and Helsinki. And I moved down with my young family to Geneva to start a similar business in Geneva. In 2001, I sold both my Scandinavian business and my Swiss business to the fourth largest Swiss banking group, the EFG Group, and had to commit to remain as chairman for the banking group in Scandinavia for 5 years and be on the board of the Swiss bank for 5 years. But when that contract ended in 2006, I was just so happy to leave the banking world and also leave the business world, and had the opportunity to set up my own foundation in Stockholm, the Oak Island Foundation, looking at the connection between personal inner growth and development and societal change. I've written 3 books. The first one, fresh out of banking, is called The Market Myth, and is really my critique, an inside critique after 20 years in banking of the both neoliberal economic thinking and also diving a little bit into the concept, what is money? And that the fact that both the market and the money is just a social construct and part of our collective imaginary, and even the free market could be very different if we wanted it to be. That's the main message in that book. Then I wrote a book together with my colleague Lena Anderson that's called The Nordic Secret, talking about how the importance of personal development was in the building up of the democracies in Scandinavia. And then my latest book, The World We Create, which is really a big history looking at how we as individuals, whether we want it or not, whether we are aware of it or not, are active co-creators of this world. And in a very large extent, we are co-creators of the unconscious aspects of this world, of which, of course, the market and the money and the whole financial system is part of sort of this unconscious construction that we have. I believe, and I argue in my books, that we are right now in a deep societal transition. We are in a paradigm shift. I believe it is at least of the magnitude when we went from the pre-modern world through the Enlightenment and Industrial Revolution into modernity. It's therefore I'm very interested in studying that transition, because I think that looking back at previous deep societal transitions, we can understand better what is actually going on right now. I think that this societal transition is going to be an emergent phenomenon, meaning that we cannot foresee what is coming out on the other side, and we cannot plan and we cannot manage the process. But I believe that as with any emergent process, any self-organizing complex system, we can influence the outcome in different ways. And I think that we are right now rapidly approaching a point, a bifurcation point, where we will either see a civilizational breakthrough or a breakdown. And what can we do to increase the odds of a breakthrough? And my answer to that is a lot what metamodernism is for me. It's about having a self-conscious participation in this process, and understanding that a lot of the things that are going to change are deep narrative aspects of society, and also that this process will involve a change in self, and it will be a personal development project at the same time. So that's essentially where I am. And of course, in this transition, the economic system is of course a core aspect, and especially since the market and the economic system have almost, as I argue in my book, The Market Myth, taken over the role as what some sociologists call the ultimate authority in society, which used to be God, in the pre-modern society, and in the modern society we had science and reason as our ultimate authority. But in the postmodern society, we don't believe in the ultimate authorities any longer. So then the market has somehow come to become the default meta-narrative. That is the only universal meta-narrative, or the only global meta-narrative that most people subscribe to. And I think that in this transition, a very important part of this transition is that we will have to leave the market and the economic system as our ultimate authority, and find a more complex way of navigating society.
Maybe I can just jump in here and then throw it back to you guys before we use up our time. So I wanted to say, like, I think right off the bat, obviously there's a lot of overlap, like the background interest in religion and you know, the traditions and the structures that sort of set the paradigm and control people's thinking, and the social. That's a term and that kind of rhetoric I've seen come up on both sides of this equation. And of course the, you know, save it for another day, but the nitty gritty details about monetary sovereignty, you know, I think you both have a lot of insight into. And this idea of a paradigm shift is common, but one you know, point of friction is this idea of planning versus emergence, right? And again, if we use the Green New Deal as an example, I'm already committed to this. I'm already on that side, and so I would hope that nobody and Thomas here you're not eschewing those types of plans, because those types of plans are exactly what's going to maximize and optimize the probability of us being on the right track of a paradigm shift and the personal development I think, and scaffolding and all that.
I think a very useful, and it happens to be lying here beside me, not for this meeting, but just by pure chance, Bill Sharp's 3 Horizons, and talking about the change in 3 horizons. Are you familiar with the 3 horizons?
I'm not, no.
Okay, so it's a very simple concept. It's when we're talking about change, the idea that Bill Sharp develops is that it is very useful to look at interventions at 3 different horizons. And the 3rd horizon, that's the furthest away. That's where we hope to be after the system's transformation, okay? And I think that process, reaching horizon 3, say where the world will be in 50 years, what will the economic and the social and governance system look like in 50 years? And given the technological development we have at the moment, we don't know, but we can have some ideas, and we can put, yeah. Then we have the 1st horizon, and that is acting within the present system. So what could we do today to make the present system functioning better, lessen suffering in the present system, and also open up the possibilities for change? And that's, of course, completely different things, and that's things that we can plan. But then we have the important 2nd horizon, and that are things that we might want to put in place, not because we believe that they will be part of the future, but they might be structures that will scaffold the transition. And for me, for example, talking about universal basic income, I don't think that universal basic income will be part of Horizon 3. I don't wish we have a world in 50 years where universal basic income is part, because I hope that we have even left the narrative of needing an income in that world. But I do think that in order for many of us to be able to let go of the old system and dive into the new one, we might need universal basic income as a 2nd horizon solution, scaffolding, as a transition. So I find it useful to always state whether, when I'm suggesting something, if this is something that is a 1st horizon initiative, 2nd horizon, or 3rd horizon. And in the first and 2nd, I definitely believe that we need to do planning and we need to take political initiatives. And things like that.
That makes a lot of sense. The things that resonated the most with me when you were talking about, of course, thinking about money as a social construct. And then the other piece is when you mentioned the Scandinavian societies emphasizing human development and that level. I think sometimes parts of the left repress that or don't want to talk about that or don't give importance to that. I think that's very important as well. One of the interesting
and that is why we have the trust in our societies, and that is why we have a functioning social democracy here. And that would not have been possible without this emphasis on helping a majority of people to be able to relate to themselves and to the world in deeper ways.
Which I think speaks to some of the limits of materialist analyses and the importance of kind of the cultural dimensions in and of itself as something that's more open and kind of can't be just reduced to some material condition or something like that. The thing I think is interesting that MMT here as a framework, not just about money, provides is this question on what the market is, what an economy is, planning versus self-serving or organizing systems. Yeah. Is that I think, we wouldn't argue, or I wouldn't argue that everything could be controlled and managed, but I think, I do think that the conditions for markets to exist, for an economy to exist at all, in contrary to what I think, orthodox or neoclassical economists, neoliberal economists argue, maybe less neoliberal economists, is that it doesn't spontaneously emerge from trade, but rather it's always being organized, it's always being produced from some kind of governance authority.
Absolutely. I mean, I make a very clear distinction in my book, and I think that's a very useful distinction when we talk about regulating markets, that markets have two sorts of rules. You have the regulating rules, which are rules put on the market, like a price ceiling and things like that. That's regulating rules. But then you have the constitutive rules of the market, which is sort of the rules telling you what can be owned. Can you own genes? What is money? And who can own things? I mean, as an individual, yes, but can a corporation acquire immaterial properties and all of that? And those are the constitutive rules. And without the constitutive rules, you don't have a market.
Right.
So you need that. And if you change the constitutive rules a little bit, like sort of example, what intellectual properties you could have over different things and how long those property rights would be. If you change these constitutive rules a little bit, then the market will clear in a different way.
Sure.
And you will have a different outcome in the market.
And that's incredibly important. And I think today, most policy debates ignore constitutive rules and just kind of take that for granted and act as if that's natural. And then we could only do kind of regulating things on top.
And of course, there is some truth in the neoclassical argument that regulating rules are always decreasing efficiency in the market. So I argue that we should be careful with regulating rules, but that with the constitutive rules, we have so much possibility to make changes to make the market both have less externalities, but also clear in a more equitable way, because the constitutive rules determine who is winning and who is losing in the market as well. And that is something that I noticed being on the board of one of the large Swiss banks. We were not big enough to be really in the inside circles of the lobbying on an international level, but certainly our colleagues Credit Suisse and UBS were, and how the banking industry was constantly lobbying both Brussels and Washington to change these constitutive rules a little bit all the time, so the market would clear more beneficial to the banking industry. And then realizing that the food industry and the pharma industry and all industries are doing these things, trying to change get away with the regulations and then tweaking the constitutive rules for their benefits. Right. And there was really nobody on the other side lobbying for the general interest, for the public interest, for the common for the common interest. And the politicians and even the policymakers, they didn't understand what was going on.
Right.
They were just buying whatever we said.
Yeah. And so in terms of, and I don't want to take too much more of your time, but in terms of
but 5 more minutes is fine. Yeah.
Okay. In terms of the first horizon, as you mentioned, we have the nation states as we experience them today that are setting all of these laws and policies that are, shaping property rights and constructing all the infrastructure. And then for MMTers, it's also very important where we spend, where we don't spend, where we outsource that spending to bank credit, all of those decisions, monetary policy, that's clearly very important. And a Green New Deal is a part of starting to remake that or reform that, right? And then we have here important discussions and debates about whether UBI is the way to go, whether the job guarantee is the way to go, whether there's both should be done, et cetera, to reach to construct these second horizons and reach the third horizons, as you mentioned. Yeah. So I'm totally in alignment with that. I think that's what needs to be done. And in my work, it's a good way of describing, I think, the path that needs to be taken.
My critique a little bit, and then that's not so much about MMT because I haven't read there enough, but I've been quite involved with other alternative economic thinking, like the New Economics Foundation in London under Stuart Wallace, and then he moved from the New Economics Foundation to set up the well-being economy together with Catherine Tribeck and others. And I'm also a good friend of John Fullerton, if you know him, and he's working in the alternative economist field. But my critique of all of that is that most of the thinking is still done in the old, more or less in the old neoclassical paradigm of markets. And I believe that the technological evolution that we see right now opens up so many possibilities and challenges. One thing is, of course, that I firmly believe that we will not in 10 years, or definitely not in 20 years, have to work 40 hours a week, 40 years of our lives. And if you look at that with the old economic lens, then of course that is a huge problem. That is unemployment. Mm-hmm. But if you look at with just humanistic eyes, of course, this is a liberation for humanity. But to be able to capture that, then we need a completely new way of looking at the economy. And then the second thing that with the new technology, I think there's so much potential in the distributed ledger technology that is developing right now, blockchain, etc. And that so far has only been used to invent alternative currencies that are just again an old-fashioned implementation of a currency like the dollar, but somebody else is in control. So I would really want to see if there could be a closer dialogue between what is happening on the digital tech development side and what is happening on the new economic thinking side, and see what could come out of a dialogue between those two.
My colleague Rowan Gray, his dissertation is on that, and he's an expert in that field. And he recognizes the value, the technological value in the blockchain, but is very, very critical of the way it's being used to naturalize or reify this kind of market fetishism.
Of course.
And so instead, he's trying to develop a theory and approach to redesigning public currencies and the public payment system with blockchain. The thing that most importantly stands out to me is, of course, to protect privacy in people because of the current war on cash that we currently have. And you have these financial institutions that are trying to make everything go to credit cards and everything to go to digital. and they have our data, and then you have Facebook trying to create their own currency in these things, right? So how do we use blockchain and some of these technologies to improve public payment systems and public currencies, to respect our privacy, to protect these things, right? To make
But you also have a problem there, and that's a discussion for another time. But again, having been for 5 years on the board of one of the largest Swiss banks, I'm very aware of the fact how much criminal money is floating around in the world. And we don't want to have we want to have a technology that protects our privacy, yes, but we don't want to create an offshore heaven for drug money, arms trade money, trafficking money, and all of that. So there is a fine balance there.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. And I also think like some of those problems can be addressed by better policy in other areas, like ending the war on drugs and all those things, right? And that is a conversation for another time. And then the other thing I think is critical is the MMT world separates itself from some of these new economic thinkers that view markets and the economy as operating under certain laws that we can't really do anything about. And so, if technology changes or whatnot, it's the market that's leading the way. I think really what makes us different is that we view law and governance as first and foremost what opens things up to economies. And so I wish we would have been working 20 hours less a week 20 years ago. I mean, Keynes imagined that by the turn of the century, we would have already been working 20 hours a week or whatnot. So I think that's a political choice and a choice that...
Of course it is, but and it's also just a functioning of the capitalistic system. I mean, we could just read our old Marx there again. I mean, this is what is happening. I mean, if you increase the efficiency of the system under the capitalist system, it will make the capitalists richer, but the average worker will not get anything of that. So.
Right. And so I tend to advocate for, first and foremost, yes, a reduction in work hours. And the reason why we push the idea of a job guarantee so much is to open up the design and political space to reimagine work itself. Currently, work is exploitative, people hate it, and it's only something that comes about through private investment. So if somebody can make profits off of something, jobs exist. Instead, I think we need to have the debate in not just political, but also in a design perspective, in an administrative management perspective, in a lot of levels, on what work can be. So that if it means 10, 15, 20 hours a week in a community garden, or teaching seniors some new arts or something like that, or even the arts, right? And opening up that space to work itself. And in that sense, for me, it kind of is like a UBI, except with infrastructure, with the infrastructure for people to do things in their community that are meaningful, that still, I think, acknowledge the importance, I think, of humans being social on a daily basis in dealing with kind of those political questions of how you be engaged in your community, et cetera, and producing value that isn't solely for capitalist efficiency, but rather for meeting human objectives, well-being, et cetera. And so that's kind of where we stand on that. And the expert on that, I don't know if you've read her book, Pavlina Cherneva. She wrote the Job Guarantee book, and she worked. I
think I saw an interview with the two of you.
Okay.
Is that? Yeah.
She wrote the book called the Case for a Job Guarantee, and now she's heading the Economic Democracy Initiative in Bard College, I believe, and she actually got some support from George Soros to do that project, which is kind of
wonderful. Okay. I got to go.
Right.
Thank you so much for this conversation. Very, very stimulating. I hope that we can continue this at another time. And thank you so much, Brent, for putting us in in contact. I think you had the right instinct there.
Good, thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Thomas, if both of you have like one more minute, maybe I could just offer a closing thought, and then Andrés, if you're free, if you want to chat for a bit, I'm free. But yeah, my thoughts are, it's great to hear you guys go back and forth and just let that organically emerge. And I wanted to know, obviously, there's a big kind of not rat's nest or elephant in the room, but our underlying metaphysics is still in a bit of tension, and our underlying politics, right? And that aside for the moment, what I'm interested in just, closing this out is to say, I'd like to see more cross-pollination between so-called metamodernists and so-called MMTers. And if you guys have any thoughts on that, that's what I'd like to explore too, and see what questions you guys have for each other. But yeah, we're out of time. So I appreciate us doing just this. It's great.
Thank you so much.
Let's do it again soon, Thomas, and continue the conversation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
Thomas.
Thank you.
Wow, that was riveting. I just wanted to give some closing thoughts here to say there's much more to say. And we're just at the beginning of this video production mode of covering topics and being more public facing and interactive. So look forward to more videos and content about MMT and metamodernism, and please join the Patreon. This is a great opportunity to help fund directly this type of work, to help usher the convergence of these different discourses and communities, and in so doing, help validate them and help purge some of the dogma, and especially with the different groups attracted to metamodernism, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of reactionary currents, and we want to nip that in the bud. And as it stands, a lot of the wrong projects are getting funding, and the abstract organization is not. So this is a great opportunity to chip in at the dollar level or above. Sky's the limit, but start small, help us work out the different tiers, the different reward structures, and let us know the type of content you want to see. So let me thank again Tomas Bjorkman and Andrés Bernal for meeting in this format and venue. And yeah, I think it came out good with a little bit of intro. Like I said, there's a lot more to say, so stay tuned. This is Patreon video number 4. And I'm just going to try to keep cranking them out. And the more patrons we get, the faster I'll be able to unlock and release the patron videos, because I really want to get this content out there. I've got a lot of free content. Case in point, Tomas and I worked together on a trilogy. I'm gonna put that up here. Get people to check it out. Andrés Bernal, in fact, gave me some good critical constructive feedback, which I still have to integrate more formally into that piece. But again, that is to say, the discourse of MMT is incredibly complex, incredibly novel. And I'm not really a contributor to that space. However, I am one of the sort of new frontier authors of metamodernism, so to speak. So I see a lot of opportunity there, and I've thought this for a long time, that these are the directions we need to go. We need to build out a movement. We need to exponentially grow. And I don't mean in some sort of top-heavy, inflated sense. I don't want to be a big PR front like effective altruism, patting itself on the back. We want to galvanize deep radical transformation in all people, in all institutions, and really simplify and abstract politics, political discourse, and sociology to actualize these ideas in this paradigm shift. It's almost like we have to believe in it, have some faith, but the writing is on the wall. the evidence is pouring in. And these paradigms, as we, build the airplane in free fall, so to speak, they are proving themselves. They are going to work. And it's going to be the story of our lifetimes. So I look forward to meeting you, whoever you are, and seeing your name join our think tank. Until next time, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and good luck. I'm Brent Cooper, your host and social philosopher. Yeah. Bingo, bango, bongo.